Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. A very warm welcome to this special event celebrating 70 years of diplomatic relations between the Republic of Indonesia and the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. This hybrid webinar has been organized by the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia in Sri Lanka in collaboration with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka and the Lakshman Kadurgama Institute of International Relations and Strategic Studies, also known as the LKI. May I now kindly request the audience to rise up for the national anthems of Sri Lanka and Indonesia.
Sri Lanka Mata, Appa Sri Lanka, Namo 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 Mata, Sundara Sidarini, Surani Ati Sobhamana Lanka, Ranya Ganaya Mekamal Balatulu Jaya Bhumiya Ranya, Appa Appa Sapa Siri Seta Sadhana, Jivana Emaga, Pili Kandu Mena Appa Bhakti Puja, Namo Namo Mata, Appa Sri Lanka, Namo 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 Mata, Upave Appa Vidya, Upamaya Appa Satya, Upare Appa Shanti, Appa Hada Tula Bhakti, Uppa Appa Aloke, Appa Ge Anuprane, Uppa Appa Jivanale, Appa Muktiya Obave, Nava Jivana Divini, Nitila Appa Kubu
Thank you. It is my pleasure to invite the first speaker of the opening session, Dr. Dayantha Laksiri Mendis, the Executive Director of the LKI, to deliver his welcome remarks.
Honorable Foreign Ministers, Excellencies, and ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasant duty to thank the distinguished Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, Honorable Retno Elvi Masudi, for sending a recorded speech for this occasion. She was formerly the Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to the Kingdom of Norway, and also Ambassador of Indonesia to the Kingdom of Netherlands. She is a recipient of many international awards of repute. It is also my duty to thank the distinguished Minister of Foreign Affairs, Honorable Sabri of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, for sending a recorded speech for this occasion. He is the President Council. He was formerly the Minister of Justice, and thereafter he served as Minister of Finance. He has sacrificed a lucrative legal practice to serve Sri Lanka. So also my duty to thank the Foreign Secretary, Madam Aruni Wijewardene, for sending a recorded speech for this occasion. She was formerly Sri Lanka's ambassador to Austria, with accreditation to many countries and permanent representative to UN organizations in Vienna. She served as Director of Policy Making as an international civil servant in the IAEA Vienna. I welcome His Excellency Dibi Gustina Tobing, distinguished Ambassador of Indonesia to Sri Lanka and the Maldives. She is the first lady ambassador from that country to Sri Lanka. She also served as Consul General of Indonesia in Perth, Australia, and she is a member of the panel discussion. I welcome the board members of the Lakshman Khadiragam Institute of International Relations, including Mrs. Suganti Khadiragama, wife of the distinguished foreign minister in whose memory this institution is established. I welcome the distinguished panelists of the webinar, including Her Excellency Yasoja Gunasekara, Ambassador of Sri Lanka to Indonesia. Distinguished Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in welcoming all of you, I wish to say Indonesia and Sri Lanka have many things in common. Both countries were ruled by the Kingdom of Netherlands in the colonial period. Indonesian Malays have come to Ceylon, as it was called at that time, as soldiers and workers during the Dutch period, and served Sri Lanka in an exemplary manner in the armed forces and in the legal and medical professions. Dr. Karim, I think he's around here, has dealt with this subject exhaustively in his monumental book titled Malays in Sri Lanka. Indonesia and Sri Lanka are countries in the Indian Ocean. They encounter problems and challenges related to maritime security, delimitation of maritime zones, illegal fishing, prevention of marine pollution, and the conservation of marine resources. Sharing information relating to matters of paramount importance to Sri Lanka and Indonesia. Great power rivalry in the Indian Ocean impacts both countries. Geopolitical risk assessment is of value to both countries, and we have an expert who does this from Indonesia in our panel today. Indonesia is an important country in the Indian Ocean. She's a member of the UN Security Council, chair of the G20, and she has the biggest economy in the ASEAN countries. Indonesia is also most populated, is the most populated Islamic country in the world. Above all, one thing I think I should point out is they have a lady minister of foreign affairs for the first time, and also lady ambassador in Sri Lanka for the first time. What a great step. Quantum leap for an Islamic country. Thank you very much. Sri Lanka is also an important country in the Indian Ocean. She is strategically placed in the Indian Ocean. She has a vast sea space for the development of the blue economy. Unfortunately, her macroeconomic policies have let her down a little bit. It will bounce back. There's a great need to reset the economy to meet the economic challenges. Let us discuss these issues in the webinar with reference to Sri Lanka and Indonesia. Once again, I warmly welcome you to this ceremony and the webinar to commemorate 70 years of diplomatic relations between the Republic of Indonesia and the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mendes. I would like to kindly draw your attention to the screen for a pre-recorded goodwill message from Her Excellency Retno LP Marsudi, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Indonesia.
His Excellency Foreign Minister Ali Sabri, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings from Jakarta, Indonesia. Let me first congratulate His Excellency Ali Sabri on your appointment as Foreign Minister of Sri Lanka. I look forward to working with you in further strengthening Indonesia-Sri Lanka relations. The 70th anniversary of our diplomatic relation is a reminder that our partnership must remain strong in good times and bad. As a friend, Indonesia will continue to help ease the burden of the people of Sri Lanka in this time of crisis, such as the provision of medicine and medical equipment since April this year. Ladies and gentlemen, the global situation today is in a state of flux, and no country is immune from its devastating effect. Pressures caused by food insecurity, energy price hikes, and financial instability add more burden to our people, especially in developing and low-income countries. To some countries in our region, a 10% increase in oil prices will reduce national revenue as much as 0.7%, and a 10% increase in wheat prices will result in increase of poverty level to up to 1%. Therefore, Indonesia and Sri Lanka must work together to advance the interests of developing countries. If we look back at history, Indonesia and Sri Lanka stood side by side, championing the voice of developing countries. In 1955, only 3 years after Indonesia and Sri Lanka established diplomatic relations, we initiated the Asia-Africa Conference. Our collaboration led the world to decolonization process and emboldened the spirit of inclusive multilateralism. It showed that we can be a part of solution to global problems, and we must continue to emulate this spirit in addressing the various crises we face today. Ladies and gentlemen, on the 7th decade of our partnership, I'm pleased to see that our bilateral relations continue to flourish across all sectors. Looking ahead, we must step up our effort to identify opportunities to unleash the full potential of our cooperation, among others by intensifying agriculture cooperation as well as encouraging greater participation of Indonesian state-owned enterprises in Sri Lanka development. Let us use this momentum to deepen our cooperation for the benefit of our two peoples and beyond. I thank you very much.
The next item is a recorded goodwill message from Honorable MUM Ali Sabri, PC, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sri Lanka.
Your Excellency, Retno Marsudi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Indonesia, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, Sri Lanka and Indonesia enjoy warm relations and share many common interests and goals. Founded on long-standing historical and cultural ties that predate the formal establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries 70 years ago, in August 1952. Sri Lankan ties with Indonesia date back to ancient times when Sri Lanka was a well-known economic hub located on the maritime Silk Route, connecting East and West through trade, commerce and people. Our two nations have been influenced by Hinduism and Buddhism, and our ancient kingdoms nurtured contacts in the 9th and 12th century. We have both been shaped by experience with the Dutch that brought beautiful batik from Java to Sri Lanka. The rich, vibrant Indonesian Malay community in Sri Lanka trace their descendants to the kings, princes and warriors from the kingdom in Java and Sulawesi who found refuge on our island. In 1954, Sri Lanka hosted the Colombo Powers Conference with 5 leading countries in Asia. Indonesia was an important member in this group that convened to discuss matters relating to the post-World War II and post-colonial era. Indonesia, in many ways, led the call for Afro-Asian solidarity. Sri Lanka, then known as Ceylon, worked closely with Indonesia and others in the Bandung movement that gave inspiration to the birth of non-aligned movement. This has contributed to forge a strong pillar between Sri Lanka and Indonesia, where we share global priorities in the international arena on social economic development and international relations. We continue to work closely in multilateral fora, including through membership in the United Nations, and our relationship also have evolved and deepened through our work in IORA, Colombo Process, Bali Process, Asia Cooperation Dialogue, and Asian Regional Forum to build a stronger community in the Asia-Pacific region. At this very difficult time in my country's history, I hope Sri Lanka can count on even stronger support from Indonesia in multilateral fora, particularly given the Indonesia's influence as G20 president, incoming ASEAN chair, and a leading member of the state of the OIC. The ocean, in a sense, ties us closer, and one could even say that Sri Lanka is Indonesia's friendly maritime neighbor to the west across the Indian Ocean. Just as Sri Lankan society from ancient time has benefited from the Indonesian culture, with people-to-people interaction via ocean links, ocean waves have also brought both our countries shared pain at times, most recently from the Indian Ocean tsunami in December 2004. The ocean binds us, and the ocean is the future. I hope Sri Lanka and Indonesia can collaborate and work together on maritime issues including issues related to blue economy as we chart our way forward. Dear friends, considering the unprecedented economic crisis that Sri Lanka is currently facing, we hope we can learn lessons on recovery from Indonesia's experience in overcoming the Asian financial crisis in 1997-98. We admire the progress that Indonesia has achieved as the largest economy in Southeast Asia region, on track to become the fourth largest economy in the world by 2030. We have much to learn from you. Parliament to parliament, relations between our two countries is an important pillar of our relationship, and parliamentary friendship groups have been established in both parliaments. I would like to congratulate Indonesia for successfully organizing the 144th Interparliamentary Union, IPU, Assembly and related meetings in Bali in March 2022, which was attended by the Speaker of the Sri Lankan Parliament and a delegation. Bilateral cooperation between the election commissions of our respective countries has also been mutually beneficial. I would like to take this opportunity to commend Indonesia on the important role it is currently playing as the G20 president at this challenging time for the entire world. Sri Lanka values President Joko Widodo's vision, and that I quote, Indonesia's G20 presidency will benefit all parties, including developing countries, small island countries and vulnerable groups, and not only in the interest of G20 members themselves. Not only has Indonesia chosen an apt theme for G20, recover together, recover stronger. Indonesia is working hard to bring issues to the table that are crucial to a country such as Sri Lanka, whose economic crisis is worsening by rising global fuel prices, food security, and energy security issues in the post-pandemic context. Sri Lanka's economic legacy is based on the foreign trade. In 1977, Sri Lanka was the forerunner in our region to embrace an open market economy, but had failed to modernize and adjust over time. The government, while working with international partners and organizations to address the current economic crisis, is also formulating policies to modernize Sri Lanka's economy, establish stability, and transform our economy into a competitive export-driven economy, a model that many of the countries of Southeast Asia have adopted and excelled in. President Ranil Wickremesinghe, in his policy statement at the Parliament, highlighted that before the end of the century, the Indo-Pacific region would be the most powerful economic domain in the world, of which Indonesia is a strong powerhouse. I would like to take this opportunity to reach out to you, our friends in Indonesia, to consider giving us your wholehearted support at this challenging time. We encourage the Indonesian companies to consider investing in Sri Lanka so that we could together collaborate to join and add value to region and global value chains. I must also mention that remarkable defense cooperation links between our two countries, including combating illicit drug trafficking, sharing of intelligence, and close interaction between maritime agencies, national anti-narcotic agencies, and counter-terrorism agencies. Sri Lanka shares responsibility for a common sea with Indonesia. Approximately 60,000 ships pass through the Indian Ocean annually, with about 1/3 of the world's oil passing through the region. And we have a common task of securing sea lanes in the region for safe passage of cargo for the benefit of both our nation as well as others in the region and the world at large. On this happy occasion of the 70th anniversary of the formal Indonesia-Sri Lanka diplomatic relations, let us renew our commitment to work together to strengthen our bonds for mutual benefit of our people as well as our region and beyond. I thank you.
May I now invite Her Excellency Dewi Gustina Tobing, Ambassador of Indonesia to Sri Lanka and the Maldives, to deliver her opening remarks for the session.
Thank you. Yang saya hormati Ibu Retno LP Marsudi, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, Honorable Ali Sabri, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, Her Excellency Yasuja Gunasekara, Ambassador of Sri Lanka to the Republic of Indonesia, Mr. A. Sabarullah Khan, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka, Excellencies, the Ambassadors of ASEAN, His Excellency Tan Yang Thai of Malaysia, His Excellency Yu Han Tu of Myanmar, His Excellency Poch Han Pol of Thailand, and Her Excellency Ho Thi Tan Truc of Vietnam, Excellency Won Jin Jong, Ambassador of the Republic of Korea, Dr. Dayanta Laksiri Mendis, Executive Director, Laksaman Kadir Gamar Institute of International Relations and Strategic Studies, representative from the Embassy of the People's Republic of China, Professor Kustanto Anggoro, Executive Director, Center for Geopolitics Risk Assessment and Senior Lecturer at University of Indonesia in Jakarta, Professor Chaminda Padmakumara, Head of Department of International Relations, University of Colombo, Mr. Satya Rodrigo, DG Southeast Asia Division, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, Ayubuan, Wanakam. First of all, I would like to convey my highest appreciation to Ibu Retno LP Marsudi, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, and Honorable Ali Sabri, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, for their very inspiring goodwill messages for strengthening Indonesia and Sri Lanka relations. The diplomatic relations between Indonesia and Sri Lanka was established on the 6th of August 1952, and we commemorate its 70th anniversary by having today's webinar. For that, I thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka for the support in organizing this important event. I also thank my colleague, Mr. Satya Rodrigo, Director General of Southeast Asia Division, that helping us in preparing this, as well as Her Excellency Yasuja Gunasekara, Ambassador of Sri Lanka to the Republic of Indonesia, Dr. Dayanta Laksiri Mendis, Executive Director of Laksman Kadir Gamar Institute of, and also Mr. Chatuka Senanayake, the Director of Laksman Kadir Gamar Institute, for their support and collaboration that make today's webinar happen. The webinar, which was held in collaboration with the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia, the Ministry of the Republic of Sri Lanka, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka, and also the Laksman Kadir Gamar Institute, aimed to raise public awareness of the two countries' relations that existed in about the 8th century. Relations between the two friendly countries, which have historical and cultural ties, but are separated from the Indian Ocean, I should say connected by the Indian Ocean, were further strengthened by the official opening of the diplomatic relations in 1952. Since then, Indonesia and Sri Lanka have strengthened bilateral ties in various fields of mutual interest. The two countries also become the pioneers of the Asia-Africa Conference, which took place in April 1955 in Bandung, and also continued by the Colombo Conference held in Sri Lanka in April and May 1954. The Asia-Africa Conference, which outcome of the Bandung Principles, then gave birth of the non-aligned movement on September 1st, 1961, through the first summit in Belgrade, Yugoslavia. This information will be part of the material that our panelists to deliver during the webinar discussion, and as also to hear the important message by the two foreign ministers. I therefore thank the panelists, Professor Kusnanto Anggoro, Executive Director of the Center for Race Studies, and Professor Chaminda Padmakumara, Head of the Department of International Relations, University of Colombo, who is willing to share their knowledge with us in this 70th year anniversary between Indonesia and Sri Lanka. Finally, as an ambassador of Indonesia and a friend of Sri Lanka, I stand ready to work with Sri Lankan government and the people of Sri Lanka to forge a closer bond of friendly relations and reaffirm Indonesia's commitment to being a reliable friend during this challenging time. Together, we will go out confidently, overcoming multiple current challenges, supporting each other, and toward the best and prosperity of our people. Bohoma Stuti, Nandri, thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We will now have a recorded message from Ms. Arni Wijewardena, Secretary to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Sri Lanka.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends. Modern diplomatic relations between Sri Lanka and Indonesia, established in 1952, are firmly anchored in ancient cultural, religious, and trade connections. In the post-colonial world, both countries were among the initiators of the historic 1955 Asia-Africa Conference in Bandung, which provided the foundation and inspiration to the non-aligned movement with 120 members today, making it the largest group in the United Nations. In recent times, the bilateral relationship was significantly enhanced following the state visit of former President of Sri Lanka, Maithripala Sirisena, to Jakarta in 2017, and the state visit of President Widodo to Sri Lanka in 2018. President Ranil Wickremesinghe concluded a successful visit to Indonesia in 2016, when he was then Prime Minister. The bilateral relationship is multifaceted, covering in broad terms political, economic, defense, educational, and cultural cooperation. Over the last 70 years, there has been regular interaction at high level between the two countries, engagement between parliaments, business communities, and people-to-people contact. Sri Lanka and Indonesia have shared interests and cooperate actively in multilateral fora, such as the United Nations, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, the ASEAN Regional Forum, the Colombo Process, the Bali Process, the Asian Cooperation Dialogue, G77, and the Non-Aligned Movement. Today, the leaders of both our countries emphasize the importance of economic cooperation, since this results in tangible benefits for the people of the two countries. A joint working group on trade and investment will be formed shortly, and it is hoped that this mechanism will identify and disentangle bilateral trade issues that have resulted in trade between the two countries still being way below the US $1 billion potential and goal set by the two leaders of the countries in 2012. It is also hoped that the joint working group will develop an action plan that will lead to significant enhancement of trade and investment between our two countries. Further, the possibility of a preferential trade agreement between the two countries is currently under consideration. We encourage the Chambers of Commerce of Indonesia and Sri Lanka to organize more business fora, the exchange of business delegations between our countries, and participation in trade and investment fairs. 2 meetings of the Joint Commission for Bilateral Cooperation between the two countries have been held, and Sri Lanka looks forward to hosting the 3rd Joint Commission at the earliest suitable opportunity, to give impetus to renew engagement between key government agencies in both our countries. Leading Sri Lankan companies in apparel, IT, shipping and logistics, palm oil, and activated carbon have invested more than US $700 million in Indonesia. These Sri Lankan companies have created many jobs in Indonesia and have made tangible contributions to the quality of life of the communities in which they operate. As our maritime neighbor and a major economy in Southeast Asia, we would like to see more investment by Indonesian companies in Sri Lanka, which could take advantage of our skilled labor force, attractive investment incentives, and strategic location, digital connectivity, and modern infrastructure. Promotion of such partnerships with Sri Lanka in this difficult time would be an important demonstration that Indonesia values its partnership and relationship with Sri Lanka. Indonesia was amongst the first countries to come to Sri Lanka's aid in response to an appeal for essential medicines to send 3.1 tons of vital medicine and medical equipment in April and May of this year. We appreciate this gesture at a challenging time for Sri Lanka during the 70th anniversary of our bilateral relations. The importance of increasing people-to-people contact is paramount to create better understanding between our two countries. In this context, tourism can play a strong role to help bring people and businesses together. Our national airlines, Sri Lankan Airlines, has now daily flights to Jakarta, with flight time only 4.5 hours. Sri Lanka grants free visas for Indonesians for tourism purposes, and we look forward to Indonesia facilitating reciprocally the same to increase tourism from Sri Lankans, as was the case prior to the COVID pandemic. Another area with great potential is information technology. Indonesia is the 3rd largest ICT hub after China and India. Sri Lanka has skilled human resources, which we understand there is a shortage of in Indonesia. The relationship between Sri Lanka and Indonesia, which marks 70 years this month, is built on strong foundations and offers the potential for mutually beneficial cooperation. We will focus on implementation of commitments entered into by the two governments, particularly in areas where agreements and MOUs have been signed, as well as look into new areas and opportunities. This important milestone anniversary offers both sides the opportunity to reinvigorate and expand the rich and deep relationship built on many commonalities. And we look forward to work with Indonesia to achieve greater heights. I thank you.
At the request of the Ambassador of Indonesia to Sri Lanka and the Maldives, I'm pleased to invite the following members of the audience to come up on stage for a photograph: the Ambassador of Myanmar, the High Commissioner of Malaysia, the Ambassador of Korea, the Ambassador of Vietnam, the Ambassador of Thailand, the Acting Additional Secretary from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Sri Lanka, Mr. A. Sabarullah Khan, Dr. Dayantha Laksiri Mendis, Executive Director of the LKI, the Director General from the Southeast Asia Division of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Satya Rodrigo, and Professor Chaminda Padmakumara, the Head of Department of International Relations at the University of Colombo. And the representative from the Chinese High Commission. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the panel discussion. I would like to invite the following distinguished members of this panel who are physically present with us to please come up on stage and be seated. Her Excellency Dery Gustina Tobing, Ambassador of Indonesia to Sri Lanka and the Maldives, Dr. Dayantha Laksiri Mendis, Executive Director of the LKI, and Professor Chaminda Padmakumara, the Head of Department of International Relations at the University of Colombo. We are also joined virtually by Her Excellency Yashoja Gunasekara, Ambassador of Sri Lanka to Indonesia, and Professor Kushnanto Angoro, Executive Director at the Center for Geopolitics Risk Assessment and Senior Lecturer at the University of Indonesia, Jakarta. This session will be moderated by Dr. Dayantha Laksari Mendes, Executive Director of the LKI. Dr. Mendes obtained his LLB from the University of Ceylon and was called to the bar in Sri Lanka. He obtained an MPhil in International Relations from Trinity Hall, the University of Cambridge in the UK, and a PhD from the Sri Venkateswara University in India. Dr. Mendes has served as a UN legal expert, UNDTCD, in New York, and as an ICAO air law legislation consultant in Montreal, and as a Commonwealth legal expert in London. And he was assigned to many countries and regions of the world. He also served as a legal advisor to the ICRC in Sri Lanka and as Sri Lanka's ambassador to Austria with accreditation to the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Croatia. He was also the permanent representative to the United Nations in Vienna. Over to you, Dr. Mendes.
Excellencies, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. There is no specific theme for the panel discussion. It has been purposely put without a specific theme. It is intended to give full discretion to the speakers on any aspect of diplomatic relations between Indonesia and Sri Lanka. However, I would like to outline 5 important areas which might be of value. These are as follows. Past relations between Indonesia and Sri Lanka, first point. Second, future relations, as Ambassador Aruni Vijayawardena said, can be of value to both countries at multilateral and bilateral levels. Third, in my view, is threats and challenges encountered by both countries in a rapidly changing world. It was also said in the opening session. Fourthly, enhancing the connectivity between people to people, which is also very important. Tourism is one identified in the opening session. One did not identify is respecting norms and standards and values at national and international level. That's a very important point. I'm not saying rule-based order, but respecting certain values. The 4 speakers are, the first speaker, His Excellency Dwi Gustina Tobing, Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to Sri Lanka and the Maldives. She's the First Lady Ambassador of Indonesia, Sri Lanka and the Maldives. She has a master's degree in business administration from the University of Birmingham, UK. Our second speaker is His Excellency Yashoja Gunasekara, Ambassador of Sri Lanka in Indonesia. She is a career diplomat with 25 years of experience. She served as High Commissioner in Bangladesh and Consul General in Guangzhou, China. She holds an LLB degree in law from Warwick University in the UK and master's degree in foreign affairs and trade from Monash University. Our third speaker is Professor Kushnanto Angoro, Executive Director of Center for Geopolitics Risk Assessment in Jakarta. Very pertinent position, risk assessment, geopolitics risk assessment. I hope he will tell us how to deal with geopolitical situations which arise from time to time. We look forward to his interventions. He has been actively involved in reforming the security sector in Indonesia. He has a publication titled Indonesia Defense Posture 2015, and many other publications which I couldn't read, some of them excellent publications relating to transnational security concerns. And we look forward to his intervention. Our fourth speaker is Professor Chaminda Padmakumar, who is on stage, head of the Department of International Relations, University of Colombo, Sri Lanka. He has a PhD in International Relations from South Asian University in New Delhi, India. He has published several research papers on various aspects of international, which are very, very relevant to Sri Lanka at this time. In challenging times or in difficult times, whatever the times you call it, best of times or worst of times, or as Shakespeare said that in his Tale of Two Cities, whatever way you describe, it comes to the boil down to the same thing. So with these little words of introduction, a preliminary preface to this discussion, I look forward and invite Her Excellency T.V. Gustidas Tubing to address the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mendes. Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you also for all of you that coming to our event today in commemorating 70 years anniversary of diplomatic relations between Indonesia and Sri Lanka. For me, I'm so honored to have you. And I know that we have to prepare this not really in a long time, but just a little bit short time, but still we can manage to do this successfully. It only we can do because of the support of every of you here with us. Also for this time, also I also should say the high support also of the Foreign Secretary Ms. Aruni Wijewardane in preparing our event. I talked to Foreign Secretary also for some times, and we report every preparation. What did we do with Mr. Satya, especially also with Dr. Mendes, and thankful for all the kind support. So at this opportunity, I would like to highlight about our background relation long time ago. Actually, it's already been highlighted by dignitaries, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Indonesia, as well as the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka. But I also would like to raise again some point here. Okay, yeah. If we could see it here in the chart, actually this is the story about the relation between Indonesia and Sri Lanka. Started 8th century earlier, and it's very, very, very long relations. And until on this here, relation between Indonesia and Sri Lanka have historically been established since the 8th century. And the Abaya Giriwara inscription mentioned that Rakai Panangkaran brought teachers from North India or Sri Lanka when he converted to Buddhism. The construction of the Borobudur Temple, which is the biggest Buddhist temple in the world, is also inseparable from the approval of Rakai Panangkaran to the Buddhists. Rakai Panangkaran was the second king of the Medan Kingdom, who lived in the Central Java period of the so-called ancient Mataram Kingdom, which ruled around year 770s. And also, after the heyday Buddhist of Hinduism ended, the Islamic and colonial eras changed, and the relation between the two regions remained intact. The Dutch company, the VOC, call it, control not only Indonesia territory but also Sri Lanka, and both are come under VOC control in the 17th and 18th centuries. Kings from Sulawesi, Ternate, Tidore to Kupang, including Bugis, Sundanese, Maduris, Minangkabau, Ambonese, Balinese in Indonesia were exiled to Sri Lanka. Many of these communities reside in Colombo, Galle, Trincomalee, and Jaffna. Some places in Sri Lanka also refer to identical Indonesian names such as Jawate and Jaela, to street names such as Melayu Street, Jawa Lane, and Jalan Padang. And many of them call now as a Malay society, mostly descendant from Indonesia. Relation between the two French countries, which was historically and culturally were further strengthened with the opening of the diplomatic relations in 6 of August 1952. Since then, Indonesia and Sri Lanka have strengthened bilateral ties in various fields of mutual interest. Now, as we see here, we also have many cooperation actually been established between Indonesia and Sri Lanka. Many MOU, about 11 MOU, which I should mention a few of them about terrorism, education training, and then cooperation on against illicit trafficking and narcotics and drugs, and also MOU in higher education and research and technology, as well as joint communique to combat illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing and to promote sustainable fishery governance. In the forum, actually, mechanism, the two countries has a joint commission for bilateral relations, which mentioned by Foreign Secretary. We are now actually supposed to be to hold the third joint commission, which hopefully will be able to conduct in the near future, as well as the signing of the letter of intent on enhancing defense cooperation and the establishment of the joint working group on trade and investment. And we are also now working on the starting negotiation of the preferential tariff trade agreement. The cooperation between parliamentarian, as mentioned by the Foreign Minister Ali Sabri, is also very, very strong. They have also a friendship association, and also the involvement of the two parliamentary people to enhance the relation is so close. And we hope that this continuously work together to enhance more relation between the two countries. Why need to work with Indonesia? Well, it's already been explained along of history how important the relations between Indonesia and Sri Lanka, politically as well as economically, and in social people-to-people connection. Before coming to the bilateral again, in order to see the advanced further relations between the two countries, I would like also to present about Indonesia in order to bring the attention of how need for us to close relations and to support each other. In doing, Indonesia now is the member of the G20. It's because of its GDP already exceed $1 trillion US dollar. With this, bring Indonesia one of the most important countries also in the world. At this time is the 16th rank of the GDP in the world. So with this also bring Indonesia play important role in the G20, and we are now the presidency of the G20 for this year. With the population of Indonesia of 272 million, in which under age of 25 years demographic bonus, we call it, because we have about 44% of our demographic now is under 25, in which actually this is also could be a strength, could be a weakness when we don't manage them properly. So in that way, we try to make our demographic of the 44% under 25 to be stronger, to make even Indonesia faster and stronger in the expanding the economy. So we put the importance of human resource education in Indonesia. And in terms of investment destination also, Indonesia is the fourth most prospective investment destination in the world. as well as because of the sovereign credit rating of Indonesia and also the easiest of doing business, which continue improving from time to time. So all of the effect of this, we would like also to offer for Sri Lanka to see how can we work together more closer. As the presidency of the G20, Indonesia assumed in the 2022 after the handover from Italy in October 2021. The Indonesian G20 presidency carries the spirit of recovery with the theme Recover Together, Recover Stronger. Since the world is under pressure due to the COVID pandemic, so requiring joint and inclusive efforts to find a way or solution for recovery. The G20 represent the world's economy and political power, with its members representing 80% of the world's GDP, 70% of global export, and 60% of the worldwide population. On various occasions, President Joko Widodo emphasizes the inclusiveness as the priority of Indonesia leadership in the G20, and always stressed by my president, leave no one behind. Indonesia G20 presidency is beneficial for the developing countries, small islands, developing states, and vulnerable groups, and also gives significant attention to the developing countries in Asia, Africa, South America, including the small island nations in the Pacific and Caribbean. Understanding the challenging the need for collective action, Indonesia focused on three main pillars. Namely global health architecture, sustainable energy transition, and digital transformation. Through these pillars, Indonesia continues to take the lead in ensuring equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines, promoting sustainable and inclusive economic development through MSME's participation and digital economy. In line with the spirit of Recover Together, Recover Stronger, Indonesia stands ready to uplift the bilateral economic relations with Sri Lanka to be stronger and more productive. Next, I would like also to highlight the visit of President Joko Widodo in attending the G7 summit. After attending the G7 meeting, President Joko Widodo held an official meeting with the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, on June 29 at the Mariinsky Palace and in Kiev, and continued to have a meeting with the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, at the Kremlin Palace on June 30, 2022. Meeting with the President of Ukraine and the Russian President took place within the framework of Dialogue for Peace. Peace and humanity have always been a priority for Indonesian foreign policy. Indonesia Constitution mandate that Indonesia always contribute to creating world peace. In line with that commitment, President Joko Widodo made the visit at one time to Moscow and also to Kiev, conveyed that it is essential to promoting a peaceful settlement and that spaces for dialogue can continue to be open. President Joko Widodo also discussed the disruption of the food and fertilizer supply chain, which could impact hundreds of million people worldwide, especially in developing countries. The visit is very important, and Indonesia is always stand ready to support the peace and humanity in the world. About Indonesia, also, we are now in the membership to the UN Human Rights Council. Indonesia play big role also in this organization, and Indonesia supports Sri Lanka for our coordination in order to upright the betterment in Sri Lanka. Indonesia non-permanent membership also been held about 4 times, I think, in the last few years. And this is also show the importance of Indonesia in the United Nations. Now I'd like to refer to our attention about bilateral relation between Indonesia and Sri Lanka. Bilateral agreement, we have some already been established in economic and technical cooperation, as well as the promotion and protection and investment agreement, and double tax avoidance agreement, and many more that we already been prepared in order to make sure we could use it as the basis to enhance the relation between Indonesia and Sri Lanka. And we are now also working for the kick-off negotiation on discussing on preferential trade agreement. And we do hope that this negotiation will be able to start within this year by working together between the two officials to prepare this negotiation. However, in trade relation, as mentioned also by Foreign Secretary, our relations still relatively low compared to the potential that available for Indonesia and Sri Lanka. If we have a look in this chart, actually in the 2021, the volume of trade between the two countries is about $433 million US dollar. In which Indonesian exports 379 million US dollar and imports from Sri Lanka 53 million US dollar. This relation, this volume of trade is still far behind the potential that we have, and let alone when the crisis happened in Sri Lanka during the last 5 months, we have a very constructed trade relations in which Indonesia, compared to the period of 5 months in 2021, we reduced our volume of trade of 18%. But for Sri Lanka, it's increase of 5%. As we mentioned about the potential, as an ambassador, have worked a lot with the business sector in Sri Lanka to find what we could do together in order to expand this relation, even though during this difficult time during the economic crisis. What I look the potential between the two countries actually to combine the capacity that the two countries has, in which Indonesia has a lot of natural resources as well as the intermediate products to support the industry of Sri Lanka. And for this, I really would like also more and more have a collaboration to the private sector of Sri Lanka to see how Indonesia could support the industry of Sri Lanka in order to help to recover the economy, as the industry also could expand the export of Sri Lanka all over the world. Investment, it actually mentioned also by a previous speaker, by the minister, by foreign secretary. Indeed, this is also have a very big potential opportunity for both countries, as Indonesia not only targeting for the inbound investment, but we also looking for the opportunity for outbound investment, including to Sri Lanka. In that way, as mentioned by my foreign minister, we also would like to expand the possibility of Indonesian state-owned company to explore the possibility of investing in many sectors in Sri Lanka, especially on strategic products that we have from Indonesia. So we could also collaborate together in that kind of sector to support economy of Sri Lanka. In maritime, and also we already have the capacity to do that. And we know that Sri Lanka also have a very big potency, especially the strategic location and the close bond between our two maritime. That is also what we are looking actually in the future to discuss the possibility of having these relations in maritime and to strengthen also the cooperation in strengthening the security in the region. In the international and regional cooperation, we actively participate Indonesia and Sri Lanka in many organizations in the Bali Process and Bali Democracy Forum, Asia Cooperation Dialogue, IORA, the Colombo Plan, Archipelagic and Island States Forum, as well as in ASEAN Regional Forum. I think through this cooperation, we also could enhance our expertise and also knowledge and possible for helping each other and supporting each other. In the IT sector, as already mentioned before earlier by the Foreign Secretary, that is also the possibility cooperation that we could advance as well as in social sectors. People-to-people connection, people-to-people connection also is very, very important. As we know, there are many descendants of Indonesia in Sri Lanka, the Malay Society. That organization also, we try and to connect them as much as possible to see how the collaboration by the ascensor of them in Indonesia, the possibility of having the support and to preserve the cultural values in both countries. So I think between Malay society, we do hope also another engagement that we could support each other, as we know that the society also is very strong here in Sri Lanka, and we also would like to bring the connection to Indonesia. People-to-people connection is another thing that Indonesia also would like to learn more with Sri Lanka. And for this, we also offer a scholarship. We call it Dharma Siswa. It's an annually to international students that we render, including also to students from Sri Lanka. So through this cooperation, as well as the potential of connecting the university, I do hope actually we have more closer than what we have now, because I think in a university link between Indonesia and Sri Lanka, still many potential, and I think we have to work together by having more collaboration with many and by making many forums as well, in order to attract the attention of students of both countries to exchange. So in that sense, actually, I would like to see the possibility of having also the Joint Commission, because through the Joint Commission, we will be able to discuss so many things, multi-sector, and of course, through this commission, we will be able also to see, to find out what more collaboration that we need to do in the near future. So I would just like to bring the awareness of us here, how important the relation between Indonesia and Sri Lanka. And of course, for this, I'm ready to work together, and I already do some part of it with my team from the embassy. And I'm so happy with the collaboration rendered by the government of Sri Lanka to Indonesia, as well as by the people of Sri Lanka. The friendship will go nurture. The milestone of 70th years anniversary will go beyond, and we are happy to collaborate with Sri Lanka. I thank you for the opportunity.
Our next speaker is Professor Kunsanto Angoro, Executive Director of the Center for Geopolitics Risk Assessment in Jakarta. Oh, no, sorry. Our next speaker is, let me see. I was sorry about it. Our next speaker is Her Excellency Yashoja Gunasekara, Ambassador of Sri Lanka to Indonesia.
So thank you, Dr. Laksiri Mendes. Ambassador Devi Kustina Tobing, Professor Angoro, Professor Padma Kumara, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Ayubovan, Vanakkam, and Selamat Malam. It is a pleasure to participate in this webinar celebrating 70 years of the diplomatic relationship between neighboring countries, Sri Lanka and Indonesia. And as has been stressed by several speakers, one of the unique aspects of this relationship is that our countries share civilizational, cultural, and religious ties going back as far as the 5th century CE. Of course, another very important part of the cultural relationship is that we have a community in Sri Lanka, which is part of our national fabric, which has contributed a lot to the national fabric, the Sri Lankan Malays, who are of Indonesian origin primarily. So since I came here, myself and my team have been focusing a lot on the shared story, because this story has not been maybe made aware enough in this part of the world. And we have so much in common. Sri Lanka has been a melting pot, situated as it is between East and West, where East meets West over centuries. And you see the connections we have had over the centuries with Indonesia reflected in things like the cuisine, for instance, the sambals, things like daily pul sambal have come from Indonesia, and acharus like Malay pickle. So many contributions have been made to our cultural traditions. The batiks came originally from Indonesia. It was a royal tradition brought to Sri Lanka and many other parts of Asia by Dutch officials, because of course Sri Lanka at one time was governed from here in Jakarta, where I'm sitting, which was then called Batavia. And of course, ingenious as we are, Sri Lankans created our own unique take on the batik, and now we have batiks which are uniquely Sri Lankan. The Rabana, which is so much part of our musical traditions, came originally from this country. And then we have things like the words. When we talk about the two esteemed ministers, in Sri Lanka we say mantri, in Sinhala, and in Indonesian language they say menteri. When you talk about shoes, we say sapatu in Sinhala, and in Indonesia it is sepatu. And when you take a word like coffee, which is kopi in both Sinhala and Tamil, they use exactly the same word in Bahasa Indonesia. So, these centuries of connectivity are very much part and parcel of our shared cultural traditions now. And this is something important to build on. It's an important vantage point from which to take this relationship forward on this important 70th anniversary, because this is not necessarily a feature of all bilateral relationships that our two countries enjoy. And of course, has been stated several times before already, an important moment in this history was 1955, when Sri Lanka stood shoulder to shoulder with the 5 Asian powers, which included Indonesia, in the Bandung moment. And to this day, Sri Lanka maintains a non-aligned foreign policy based on the principle of friendship towards all. From this important foundation of being partners in the establishment of the non-aligned movement, the relationship between Sri Lanka and Indonesia is particularly vibrant in the multilateral sphere, where we have so many common priorities as well as shared outlooks on socioeconomic development and international relations. And previous speakers have referred to the many fora, including the UN, IORA, Colombo process, Bali process, ASEAN Regional Forum, in which we collaborate closely. Being partners in the Indian Ocean community and neighbors, Sri Lanka shares responsibility for common seas and airspace with Indonesia, and this makes defense cooperation perhaps one of the most active parts of our relationship. This includes combating illicit drug trafficking, sharing of information and close contacts between maritime agencies, national anti-narcotic agencies, and counter-terrorism agencies. There are regular visits in the area of defense, as well as training opportunities being offered from each side to the other, and a joint working group meeting between the counter-terrorism agencies of the two countries has been held on a regular basis, even at the height of the COVID pandemic, and has proven to be a useful mechanism for cooperation and knowledge sharing. A letter of intent will be entered into soon between our two countries to develop further cooperation in this important area of defense. I was very happy to hear that a number of speakers, including Ambassador Tobin, felt that the maritime sector is an important area in which we can cooperate when we talk about new aspects of the relationship, looking into the future beyond this important 70th anniversary. And in fact, the Sri Lankan side, the embassy, spent some time working with our friends in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Colombo and sent the Indonesian side a proposal on a maritime dialogue between our two countries. And we sent this proposal to the Indonesian side, and I think they're still studying it. And we hope that we could enter into such a dialogue in the near future, because this would be mutually beneficial. And it really is timely given the important issues that are now coming up in terms of preserving our shared oceans. There could also be important blue economy projects woven into this partnership. There has been much talk about the important and unexplored potential in terms of the economic relationship. From ancient times, when Sri Lanka was known worldwide as a major economic hub on the maritime Silk Road, Sri Lanka and Indonesia have been trading partners. And in fact, Sri Lanka was a hub in the cinnamon route, or the Jalur Rampa, which commenced in Indonesia and branched out to India and Africa. As early as 2000 BC, spices such as cinnamon from Sri Lanka and cloves from the Moluccas Islands in Indonesia found their way along the cinnamon route to the Middle East. So, from centuries ago, we have had trading relations, and we really could benefit a lot by reinvigorating this important aspect of the relationship. There's been reference made to a joint working group on trade and investment. And from our perspective, this could be a very important mechanism to basically work more effectively towards achieving the $1 billion goals in terms of trade set between our two leaders of the two countries 10 years ago in 2012. And to create an action plan that would look at not only trade relations, but significant enhancement of investment between our countries, as well as a preferential trading agreement. So this is something, of course, that cannot be done purely by governments. The business sector also should become active stakeholders in this area. And we encourage chambers, for instance, to organize more business fora, to create more awareness of opportunities between the two countries. We need to have more business delegations between our countries, as well as participation in trade fairs. It has also been mentioned earlier in this event that Sri Lankan companies have invested significant amounts of money in Indonesia. We have approximately $700 million worth of investment in Indonesia by some of Sri Lanka's leading companies in sectors such as apparel, financial services, shipping and logistics, palm oil, and activated carbon. And not only have these companies invested a significant amount, they have also created a lot of jobs, a number of jobs in Indonesia, and made tangible contributions to the quality of life of the communities in which they operate. So as our neighbor in Southeast Asia at this very difficult time in Sri Lanka, we're really encouraging more investment in Sri Lanka from Indonesia. You have some leading companies that are now being encouraged by your government to go regional and global. And we really hope that some of them will come to Sri Lanka, work with Sri Lankan companies, build products and services together, work with Sri Lanka to join the global value chains, which Indonesia is so much a part of as the leading economy in Southeast Asia and the G20 presidency. In terms of people-to-people contact, so we have had significant interaction between the top leaders of our countries, including state visits quite recently. We have contact between parliamentarians through parliamentary friendship working groups. We have meetings of government officials. And the Sri Lankan embassy in Jakarta has also done a lot of work on public diplomacy, including social media, particularly engagement with young people, because we find that Indonesian young people are very interested in learning about the world. They're very enthusiastic about engaging with other countries. So some of our very enjoyable events have been engaging with the young people of Indonesia and trying to share something about our shared connections with them. We strongly need more people-to-people contact between our two countries, including facilitating tourism and business travel. And Sri Lanka, of course, encourages more Indonesians to visit Sri Lanka for tourism. We need to have far more awareness of our countries in the respective countries for this relationship to be taken forward in the future. Ambassador Tobing also referred to the importance of higher education. And my colleagues and I went and had very successful education and research in Indonesia. Made aware that they had a number of programs through which they work with other countries. And we were looking forward to having more connections between the two academic communities, researchers and students. And this is something that is hopefully something that can take off in the near future. The relationship between our countries, in conclusion, goes back centuries, and we are traditional partners. There is much unexplored opportunity to develop this relationship further, including closer economic cooperation, maritime dialogue, and people-to-people contact. So let's use this 70th anniversary as an opportunity to further revitalize this important relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, Excellency, Ambassador Yashoja Gunasekara, for excellent presentation on trade relations between the two countries. Now, our next speaker is Professor Kusnanto Anggoro, Executive Director of the Center for Geopolitics Risk Assessment in Jakarta. So let me now call upon him to make his contribution to this webinar. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deanda Laksiri. My apologies if I mispronounce your name. Well, I'm trying to share my screen. I'm not sure where did it was. Ah, hello, test. Just, can I be heard? That's Oh, thank you so much for inviting me to give some remarks on this honorable meeting, especially to Excellency Ambassador Christina Topping, and of course also as well, yes, Suja Natika, and Mr. Moderator, Dr. Dayanta Lakshmi. Thank you so much as well for giving introduction about myself, especially on the invitation to talk about the geopolitics and so on and so forth. I'm not trying to well, actually, I will be very focused on some issues. I don't want to repeat what already been said by previous speakers, including the ambassador, who is already giving a lot of multifaceted cooperation underway during the relationship among Sri Lanka and Indonesia. And I noticed that good progress and also good potential for a better future in many aspects of relationship between Sri Lanka and Indonesia in the future. I'm sure that that would be excellent. I don't see any political constraint, especially from Indonesian perspective, when we are working better cooperation at the economic side and so on. In my experience in Indonesia, and when I advised and consulted to the Indonesian Parliament, for example, such cooperation is always welcome. So I think it is a matter of time for this kind of cooperations would be achieved very successfully in the future. In fact, our cooperation also important in some respect because Indonesia and Sri Lanka is basically all more or less the same, almost in equal degree to some reason. We both are developing countries, even when we are considering about more practical cooperation at the infrastructure, logistical potential, digital space, and so on and so forth. We also have many similarities, actually. I would like to talk about another issue, basically, which could possibly long term. It is by my intention that the title of my presentation is Reviving Mandala Concept. Somewhat a provocation actually to Dr. Chaminda Padmakumara, where I know that he has been very much interested in this kind of thing, the ancient geopolitics of South Asia and this kind of stuff, which is very important. But I just would like to emphasize that this is actually a good concept. About mandala. I don't think that is one very popular in Indonesia, especially during the contemporary students of defense, security, as well as all the international relation, which basically are more interested to looking to the West. But if you are looking at the experience that we have in the past, mandala concept is very important. When we are looking at the history, for example, Indonesia, as a matter of fact, is much more Indianized countries rather than Sinized and so on. So the influence of, say, South Asian thinking on Indonesian strategic culture is very important. As I know it, then that very productive in terms of making peace and trying to avoid war because of the tendency to, one, focusing more on the resilient dimension rather than on defense, and two, trying to achieve more consensual approach rather than on prolonged discussion and so on and so forth, just like what Indonesia has been practicing in the ASEAN way within ASEAN and so on and so forth. So again, this is a very important subject, at least from the academic perspective. And the question, though, is how this strategic culture can be beneficial, especially in forming a better relationship between Indonesia and Sri Lanka in future, perhaps in more longer perspective rather than short and medium term, because the result of this discussion, the result of this research, for example, and the result of how to identify many aspects that probably would be beneficial is surely less tangible rather than economic cooperation. But I believe that someday, somehow, this would be becoming important, especially during the 2030s, for example, where, according to me at least, there would be a very significant geopolitical change, especially considering the change of the China and American relationship, as well as how the politics surrounding South Asia would likely to be developing during the next couple of years. According to me, there are some issues that could be discussed. First is that the real manifestation of the Mandala strategic culture would likely could be seen on the what kind of orientation of defense that we would likely to have. And I'm sure that both Indonesia and Sri Lanka would likely to agree for some reason about the importance of non-provocative defense, which basically how we develop about defense capability that minimize security dilemma, threatening to no one, but it's yet capable to serve well defense need of their particular countries. This one it can be elaborated further, but because there is no alternative, I guess, especially during the next 10 years or so, that both of us should actually develop oriented ourselves on the non-provocative defense. First, because of the economically cheaper, rather than we are deploying more offensive event. Two, more importantly, of course, we will not spark armed dynamic at the regional and international level. And three, and that the third factor is because the closeness of relationship between non-provocative defense, especially as far as defense industry is concerned, with a civilian sector. And I'm sure that this relationship between civilian and defense sector will be very important in the future. Just take the case from the maritime patrol, cyber defense, developing signature capability, and so on and so forth. That would be very much important. And that cooperation, of course, it would be a pillar, especially as far as defense and security cooperation between Indonesia and Sri Lanka in future. The next issue, of course, is this one is the thing of the past, which, of course, it will be revived and further in future. I'm sure that geopolitical change would be becoming more important and changing in the next 5 to 10 years. And I'm sure as well that our potential between Sri Lanka and Indonesia is very important. We know that both countries has played a lot of role, a very decisive role in Colombo Power Conference 1944, 43, Afro-Asian Conference 1955, and non-line movement after the 1961, and so on and so forth. I'm sure that this kind of thing is very important. In the past, possibly we are focusing on the such a cooperation, especially within the context of decolonization, to strengthening our position within the global competition among big power. And I'm sure that in future, we also can cooperate on this kind of thing. Geopolitics is changing, and I think some sort of threat of colonialization or even imperialization is very strong now, especially within the context of digital space and this kind of stuff, with all things actually within the hand of the dominant player like United States or even China. Just see what's happening with Google, with Alibaba, and so on and so forth. So forging cooperation between less or powerful countries within the context would be very important. So we do need actually to revive Bandung spirit within the new construction of cooperations of countries like us. Well, I guess that's the only thing I know for the moment, at least, just to provoke not the discussion that would say a bit. But for a final note, the consequences of the strategic culture that we have, both Sri Lanka and Indonesia, is very important. According to my observation, Sri Lanka is the only country within South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation that accepted by all other members. And Indonesia is also considered as the most, at least from psychological perspective, accepted by others as ASEAN member countries as an informal leader. So considering this kind of thing, I would rather to saying that the strategic culture between Indonesia and Sri Lanka, if that would be manifested in some issues, was likely to become more beneficial and promise more cooperation between Indonesia and Sri Lanka. Again, this one is somewhat longer perspective. We cannot expect that would be a tangible result. But considering that economic cooperation that we have, social cooperation and so on and so forth that already presented by Ambassador Soja Gunasekar and Ambassador Christina Tobing, in the end of the day, eventually cooperation and the security sector would likely to cement it more stable relationship between Indonesia and Sri Lanka. Even more important than that is that would likely enhance both position of Indonesia and Sri Lanka within cooperation on respective region like SAARC and like ASEAN. And that I will be happy to wait, I don't know, for the question, for the discussion, or even for the cooperation on the particular subject. Again, thank you so much for inviting me to this very remarkable forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Angoro, for your excellent presentation. Our next speaker is Professor Chaminda Padmakumara, and I would like to ask him to be short because we are running out of time. We were scheduled to finish at 4, now we are at 4:20. So make it a little short. You're up to the podium, please.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Since I am the fourth speaker, I will make my presentation shorter. It's indeed a pleasure and privilege to be a part of the celebration of 70 years of diplomatic relations between Indonesia and Sri Lanka. At the very outset, I would like to thank Embassy of Indonesia in Colombo and Lakshman Kadirgamar Institute of International Relations and Strategic Studies for inviting me to join this historical occasion. In my short speech, I will provide you a very brief overview of the historical background of bilateral relations between Indonesia and Sri Lanka. And secondly, let me shed some light on the socio-cultural similarities, which could be a strong basis for these two nations to sustain and thrive their bilateral relations. Thirdly, I will highlight some of the important areas of common interest in which these two nations could work together to sustain and further expand bilateral relations while creating mutual benefits. When we look at the history of the bilateral relations between Indonesia and Sri Lanka, the historical tie dates back to many centuries. What the history suggests is that the relationship between these two nations began earlier in 15th century, and those interactions were largely featured by the Hinduism and Buddhism came from Indian subcontinent. The Hindu-Buddhist kingdoms of ancient Indonesia and Sri Lanka flourished contacts in 19th to 12th century CE. During the era of Srivijaya Empire, during this time, Buddhism was the principal religion of both nations. The interactions between those two nations grew in the 17th and the 17th century as both nations were under the control of Dutch East India Company. This colonial experience convinced these nations to work together and raise collective voices against imperialism, colonialism, neocolonialism, racism, and all forms of foreign aggressions, dominations, interference, or a hegemony, as well as against great power and bloc politics in various international fora. I think this shared understanding and common view on the world has been much more influential in shaping long-standing close relationship between these two nations. Indonesia and Sri Lanka officially established diplomatic relations on 2nd August 1952. The relations grew further in 1955 when Indonesia and Sri Lanka, together with India, Pakistan, and Burma, initiated the Bandung Conference. Since 1962, the status of the Indonesian consulate office in Colombo has been upgraded as an embassy. As the founding members of non-aligned movement, both countries share a strong commitment to democratic values and respect and adherence for rule of law, human rights, genuine reconciliation, and eradication of corruption. This clearly indicates that both Indonesia and Sri Lanka are adhered to the shared norms at bilateral, regional, and global level. Strong bond relations between Indonesia and Sri Lanka have been proven throughout their long history since many centuries ago and became stronger with the establishment of diplomatic relations between these two nations in the year 1952. So today, we are proud to say that these two nations celebrate 70 years of cordial and warm bilateral relations. I strongly believe these historical ties, narratives, memories can provide a strong basis for sustaining bilateral relations between these two nations. And also, I believe this is a valuable opportunity for these nations to thrive their people-to-people contact while enhancing understanding about each other's cultural heritages, history, and norms that we share. When we look at the contemporary bilateral relations between Indonesia and Sri Lanka, let me share a very recent example so I can remember the Foreign Secretary mentioned. So this is a good example to show how Indonesia has been a friend in need to Sri Lanka. Indonesian government has donated 11 types of medicine and 8 types of medical devices at a total value of 1.6 USD millions to Sri Lanka during this crisis situation. This prompt response from all stakeholders in Indonesia shows the thoughtfulness of Indonesia towards Sri Lanka and their understanding of the urgency and the challenges faced by Sri Lankan citizens during this crisis. Sri Lankan government and the people deeply appreciate this generous donation of humanitarian aid from the government of Indonesia. And we believe this is a clear manifestation of close ties of friendship between these two countries. Following this example, let me briefly explain how Indonesia and Sri Lanka can further expand their bilateral relations. I do believe both nations have ample of opportunities to sustain their bilateral relations. In this context, trade and investments becomes more important. I would like to recommend these two nations should assess the progress of the policy initiatives and mechanisms that are already existing to facilitate bilateral trade and investment. This will help two nations to have a clear understanding about the areas to be improved and come up with a variety of creative alternatives. Not only trade and investment, but cultural tourism can also be another sector where these two nations can flourish bilateral relations. And also, I believe disaster management, research collaborations are some of other areas to improve bilateral relations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor, for an excellent presentation. That was our last speaker. And now we might take one or two questions from the audience. If there are any questions, we will be delighted to direct it to the speakers or to His Excellency, if there's any question. Or are there any on the chat box, please? Can you put it if there's anything on the chat box? Any questions on the chat box? Yes, please. Professor Rohan, you have this.
My question is directed to our ambassador. Ambassador, thank you very much for co-organizing this event with the Kadir Institute. You have seen the crisis that we have faced, and you have risen to that occasion and provided valuable assistance. How do we move forward in the coming months and coming years so that there will be greater cooperation? We will move from cooperation to collaboration and to partnership. What is your vision? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. In my opinion, it's very, very important for now on Sri Lanka to focus on the economic recovery. That's one thing. And I think I'm also trust on Sri Lanka to be able to do that. Because with that, focusing on economic recovery, that's will be the way for people to getting a better life, a better position. As regard to Indonesia, as I mentioned in my presentation, Indonesia very much supportive on Sri Lanka during this difficult time. What I'm looking now, actually, how possible Indonesia to support the business people of Sri Lanka. And I already talked to many companies also, Mr. Peter also there. So how possible, because of the foreign limitation at this time, to bridge between the two nations. I'm now talking with Indonesian Exim Bank actually, but still some issue to be settled on possibility my Exim Bank to support a Sri Lankan company. It's not yet finalizing. It's not easy as well. But what I think the support from Indonesia is to support the business people, because we have actually a complementary relations. Indonesia have natural resources, a lot of natural resources, and a lot of intermediate products that could support industry of Sri Lanka. I know that Sri Lanka import a lot for their industry in order for the industry or the company to be able to export abroad. So by that kind of collaboration that we work together, that we found the best solution for both countries, I think that will be most important contribution from Indonesia to Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Ambassador, for his reply. Is there any other question? Yes, please.
Madam Ambassador, I have a question. Regarding this fuel crisis in the country, important, what type of help you can do to the Sri Lanka at present?
Can you make the question clearer, please?
I want to repeat again. Refer to the current fuel crisis in Sri Lanka. What best you can help to Sri Lanka? Like I have heard Energy Ministry given a lot of options to the foreign investors, foreign countries. What you can do best for this? Like I have heard India is opening some new fuel stations, China is supporting. So probably it is going to help the microeconomic very fast, because the entire country was stuck for more than 2-3 months. You can understand. Hope you can understand my question properly.
Thank you very much for the question. Again, as I mentioned before, we give the donation for humanitarian assistance of pharmaceutical products earlier in April. This is a very a genuine gesture from Indonesia about caring on Sri Lanka from the Indonesian side. But of course, it's not enough, I know. What we would like to have actually is sustainable growing relations. In a way, how can we connect the two community? So first, of course, by supporting the industry. I already connect also some companies from Sri Lanka to have a direct access to Indonesian resources, natural resources, that's one thing. But most important thing also, we need to find the way to finalizing or not finalizing, I mean, to start the negotiation. By start negotiation on preferential trade agreement. This is very important because through this agreement later on, it will be giving better access for Indonesia to come to Sri Lanka, and of course at the same time to support Sri Lanka. So business sector is one of the most important one. But again, human resource I think is also important. But that's why I really would like to have also more collaboration between the university of the two countries in Sri Lanka, and I have from the University of Colombo here. We will talk more later. And beside that, of course, how can we increase the possibility of investment of two sides? Actually, not only from Indonesia to Sri Lanka, but also from Sri Lanka to Indonesia, because even now I receive some requests as well to invest, to expand the market through Indonesian power housing. But we are looking also the opportunity to invest in Sri Lanka. So in that way, we also could support not only from the trading sector, but as well as the investment. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador, we can take one more question because one more question. Anybody else?
I have a two-part question, if that is okay to ask the panel. One is the Sri Lanka and Indonesia formed a joint feasibility study in 2018 to make a free trade agreement. My first question is, when can we expect it to be ratified? And secondly, as Dr. Mendes and also Professor Angoro pointed out, the people-to-people connection and also having a linchpin to interpersonal cooperation. If the free trade agreement occurs, then can we also hope to have a free movement of services or persons policies such as what is being done in the EU?
Thank you very much. I think Ambassador Yasuja could comment as well about the joint feasibility study. Actually, the process is already go beyond. We don't really let's say, need to do a very comprehensive joint feasibility study at this time because we already prepare for starting the negotiation. We already prepare some document for that. I think Ambassador also working with my Ministry of Trade in Jakarta. Ambassador, I suppose this will be the very closest step for us to start the negotiation. And I think the future is quite good because I already met Minister of Trade of Sri Lanka just recently to see how possible to proceed with this. We need, I think, at the technical level to set up everything, to prepare all the documents. So hopefully in the near future, this could be implemented of starting the negotiation. So again, this is very important because through this PTA, Preferential Trade Agreement, there will be a lot of opportunity for the two countries to be more competitive. I think that's from me. Maybe Ambassador Yasuja would like to add some more.
Thank you, Ambassador Devi. As Ambassador Devi pointed out, we really do have a good friend in the Ministry of Trade in Indonesia. They've been very enthusiastic from the time I first came here 3 years ago. They were very keen to see what they could do with us, particularly in terms of trying to revitalize working group that has been proposed on trade and investment. It's sort of got caught to certain bureaucratic tangles, but if this working group could actually be established, this could help the two parties look at how we can address some of the obstacles to trade. Speaking from Jakarta, Sri Lanka has one established brand here, Dilma Tea. But there are a large number of Sri Lankan companies that have been successful all over the world that are interested in coming into this market. And myself and my team have been actively trying to see how we can facilitate some of these companies to come here and sell products that the Indonesian public would really like to buy. I think if there was more trade and certainly more diversification of Sri Lanka's export basket, then I think that there would be a lot more interest in the PTA, in the business communities on both sides. And the Indonesian Trade Ministry has made it clear that as far as they're concerned, both the PTA as well as the joint working group would be looking at investment as well as trade. Indonesia looks at trade and investment together. Indonesia is a huge powerhouse in Asia and, of course, in Southeast Asia particularly. And that if we can work with Indonesia as a partner, if Indonesia could help Sri Lanka to enter some of the global value chains, we are a country that has great potential. We have good people. I think in my work in the Sri Lanka Foreign Service, I've worked in about 5 different countries, and we are second to none. Sri Lankan people can compete anywhere. And one of the questions was about movement of people, and particularly in the service context. I think that Indonesia has a lot of people from India working in places like the ICT sector, even heading some of the big multinationals. But Sri Lanka has very good people all over the world too. And we would love to find a way, with your help, Ambassador Devi, to have some of the Indonesian partners understand that Sri Lanka has good people and we can contribute, particularly in ICT. Sri Lanka has strong strengths, and Indonesia is growing at such a large rate in this particular area that right now you do need human resources. In the future, maybe you'll have enough people from Indonesia who can staff this sector. But right now, you have a lot of people from India who are in this sector, and Sri Lanka has people who can contribute too. So I think that the economic relationship between our two countries, including in manufacturing, as has been outlined, this could be an important way for us to build strength together, because as neighboring countries with this great heritage in terms of the historic relationship, I think in the world that we're going to be living in the future, the most important thing is to work together, strengthen our economies together, build things that we can do together on the economic front, and that really will be important for both countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that eloquent description of doing trade with Indonesia. I know it's a large country, and sometimes we have difficulty in managing with, because I remember as a lawyer long years ago, when they wanted to join to export, they wanted 40 containers of that ingredient in Sri Lanka. We couldn't find it. So we have little problems sometimes dealing with large countries, because our production levels are so low that it is difficult. So I have to say no to that gentleman. A long time ago, this is when I was just getting into my practice in the law, which I've given up now. So at that time, I found that was a difficulty. But nonetheless, we must try, never say no. At this time, we must improve our trade with all countries. That's the only solution to our problem. Thank you very much indeed. And Jeff, we want to ask a question, or last question? This is last question, Jeff.
I've been to your country several times. I enjoy your country. It's absolutely gorgeous. Just like Sri Lanka is so beautiful. If there is any way, the Sri Lankan ambassador and you, madam, arrange a few travel agents to come here, because you have so many millionaires in Indonesia, and we will provide you hotel accommodations. We are in the hotel sector. There are a few hoteliers here. We will arrange hotels. We will arrange the transport, bring some travel agents to Sri Lanka and open the door between Indonesia and Sri Lanka, madam.
Thank you. We'll be happy to talk about it later. Maybe we can discuss together. Thank you so much for the input.
Thank you. We will bring this to a close now. And the last item on the agenda is the vote of thanks by the Executive Director Administration. Short, yes, be short, make it short. Huh? Yeah.
I shall try and make it short, sir. Excellencies, dignitaries, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Lakshmana Kadirgam Institute for International Relations and Strategic Studies, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia in Sri Lanka and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Sri Lanka and the Embassy of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka in Indonesia for collaborating with the LKI to make this momentous event that marks a significant milestone in the relationship between our two countries, a success, and I hope that much more collaboration can happen between us and the relationship will grow from stride to stride. I would like to express our sincere thanks to H.C. Retno LP Marsudi, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Indonesia, and to Honorable M.U.M. Ali Sabri, PC, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sri Lanka, and Madam Aruni Vijayawardena, Secretary to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Sri Lanka, for sending their recorded messages despite a very busy schedule. I would also like to convey our great appreciation to all the ambassadors who are present here today and who are here. Thank you very much, Excellencies, for being here. And to Mr. Sabrullah Khan, our Additional Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and to other senior officers of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who are here. Our sincere appreciation goes to the distinguished panelist, Her Excellency Devi Gustina Tobing, Ambassador of Indonesia to Sri Lanka, Her Excellency Ashoja Gunasekara, our Ambassador in Indonesia, and Professor Kushnanto Angoro, Executive Director for the Center for Geopolitical Risk Assessment and Senior Lecturer at the University of Indonesia, Jakarta, and Professor Chaminda Padmakumara, Head of the Department of International Relations, University of Colombo. I hope the discussion viewpoints expressed today will aid policymakers of both countries to think of new ways of positively enrich and to grow bilateral relations. Finally, my appreciation also goes to the members of the LKI board who are here today, taking the time to be here with us and support us. To our Executive Director, Dr. Telak Mendes, for his ever-available guidance and support. And my hard-working colleagues who have made this event possible. And last but not certainly least, I should also mention, Excellency, the team from the Embassy of Indonesia, led by our Pa Heru, who have supported us in a considerable way, and we would not be here today without your support. And on that note, I call this event to an end, and I hope everyone here would join us at the library of the LKI for refreshments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We shall now proceed to the library. No, you want to speak?
No, I think it's already enough.
So we'll close.